Hi, and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. It's Science Fiction Saturday once more. And I'm doing an end of year list, my top 10 science fiction movies that I saw for the first time in 2024. Now, none of these are the really big science fiction movies. They're not your Alien Romulus, which I haven't seen. They're interesting, interstitial, lower level science fiction movies that I think do pretty damn well and entertain as well as moving the genre in cinema forward, which I think is very important as well. I spent the whole year saying that we can't just sit in the nostalgia pit. We've got to expand our horizons. It's great that we can watch and enjoy old science fiction movies, but I've done it myself. I've talked about it on the channel myself. But I think newer things always enrich us and take us forward. And yes, you can just like the old ones. Of course you can. But I don't think you're being your best self if you do that. New stuff combined with old stuff, having that whole picture of the history and the movement of science fiction movies into the 21st century is, for me, incredibly enjoyable. And it's part of what I'm going to do with Science Fiction Saturday in 2025. Most of these I've talked about on the channel, but I wanted to compile them into one video. Let's get started with Landscape with Invisible Hand, a 2023 science fiction movie about a very weird alien invasion because the aliens themselves are incredibly repugnant, incredibly selfish, and incredibly gaslighting.
I want you to repay all funds you have received.
Wait.
We've already spent everything we made just to live.
Then I will take you to court, and your families will be in debt for approximately 6 generations.
And also, they're a metaphor for uncontrolled capitalism and uncontrolled cultural imperialism. So the aliens themselves are acting like America is, for instance, or in some places China is. Really interesting film. It stars Asante Black as a young artist who is learning his craft. He's painting on walls and just increasing his knowledge of what it is to be an artist as a young man. And there's an alien invasion, and his family's circumstances change enormously as this occurs. And there's an economic shift from human beings of all different classes to the aliens. It's a fantastic film you've got to see. The more you know about politics and the more you know about 21st century politics, the better you're going to like this one. Real hidden gem. It doesn't get a big rating on IMDb because it's not pew pew zoom zoom, but it's a solid science fiction movie. And it's about ideas. And it's about if this goes on. And it's about the perils of certain economic systems and the way they disadvantage people and the way they leech creativity to become a conduit for the wealthy. Incredibly detailed and nuanced film. In 20, 30 years' time, it's going to be incredibly well regarded as a science fiction movie. And I love science fiction movies about ideas. And Landscape with Invisible Hand is definitely that. Does it all on a low budget. Does it all from a very street view. And it's incredibly underrated. This was a small budget Australian film directed by Sam Modlin. Filmed here in Melbourne. It's a movie called Time Addicts. Umbrella Entertainment released it on Blu-ray this year. And it's about a couple of drug addicts living in inner suburban Melbourne who get sent into a house to steal a duffel bag full of drugs by a local crime guy. They don't want to do it. They're close friends, but they're not in a relationship, male or female. And they go into this abandoned house and find the drugs. And one of them smokes some of the crystal they find there, not knowing that it actually is a time travel drug. And they zap back in time to the 1990s in the same location. And things get very, very timey-wimey as they do that. It's, like I said, it's low budget again, but it's got a lot of ideas going for it. The relationship between the two drug addicts is really interesting. And the way that the two of them are changed by the time travel is really fascinating. And it ends on quite a sweet and lovely grace note. I love this movie. Not because it's big and not because it's mind-blowing, but because it's very human. And it uses time travel as a way of saying that when adversity hits you, you've got an opportunity to get your shit together. And that I like a lot. I live for this kind of science fiction movie because it's not just a metaphor for war, as too many science fiction movies are. And time travel and science fiction are not bad conduits for exploring the nature of what it is to be a decent human being. Time Addicts is underrated. I'm not saying it's the best science fiction movie in the known universe. I'm saying that it's good fun, it's honest, and it does a lot with a little. The creativity and the innovation that low-budget filmmakers use constantly awes me. I love it. I will support it always. I could care less about what big corporations do when they're making movies. They tend to stuff it up quite a bit. But when small groups of people get together, make a film, scramble to get funding, and put out something that's entertaining and different, I will always support and promote that. And I love it. And Freya Tingwell and Charles Grounds are really good in this film as the two protagonists. Gotta see this one if you can. It is on a bunch of streaming services. But for me, I'm very happy I've got a physical copy of it. Next is a French animated science fiction movie from 2023, directed by Jeremy Perrin. And it's a movie called Mars Express, which is a cyberpunk futuristic film noir detective story about the perils of AI in 23rd century Earth and Mars. It looks really good, very sharp animation, really interesting plots and characters, and things don't go in the way they would in a standard film noir private eye narrative. The main protagonist is a female private eye who is living with the cybernetic ghost of her ex-partner who got killed. So her ex-partner is embodied in a robot body with a holographic head. And they go and investigate missing people and a mystery that takes them to Mars. Great stuff. This is really well plotted and fantastically detailed in its world building. Again, it's one of those movies that comes out of left field because it is French language with subtitles. And of course, I suppose there's a dub version out there somewhere. But because it isn't an English language film, it didn't get a lot of regard from critics or other people who could possibly promote it. But Mars Express is a good, solid science fiction movie. It does borrow a little bit from various anime and its influences like Ghost in the Shell and to a certain extent Akira are there. But it is a thing of itself. So I picked up a DVD of it because it did not get a Blu-ray release here in Australia. Underrated, disregarded. There's just so many hidden gems this year in all sorts of genres, horror, science fiction, drama even. There are so many big budget products that are sucking up all the oxygen of people's regard and people's attention that smaller films like this one, Mars Express, just don't get a look in. And I think one of the things I want to do moving forward with the channel is to promote those things. And yes, even though I love a lot of the classic releases that are coming out from various people, finding and giving attention to smaller films that do well, like Mars Express, which is mind-blowing in its own way. If it was made as a live-action film by an American company, it would shit on everything else in the market. But because it is an animated film, because it is made in French, it just didn't get much traction. But you should check it out, and I think you'll find it incredibly entertaining. Next one's on Netflix. Indian science fiction movie, which is partly science fiction, partly mythology based, partly a superhero narrative. I went and saw it at our local chain cinema because there was nothing else on I wanted to see and I wanted to get out and go to cinema. And so I saw this film directed by Nag Ashwin, an Indian film in Telugu, a thing called Kalki 2898 AD, which takes Hindu mythology into the far future. And at the end of our current cycle of reality, there are gods, there's one city left in the world, it's a post-apocalyptic world. There's incredible technologies and also incredible mystical forces in the world. And a group of people come together to try to defeat those who would sit at the top of the pyramid while everybody else suffers beneath them. So there is a lot of class awareness here and caste awareness, particularly in an Indian context in this. Beautifully shot film. Fantastic world building, fantastic special effects, It looks and feels like nothing else I have seen in cinema. It's got a lot of the vibe of movies like Triple R, those enormous, epic Indian movies that are starting to get some awareness in Anglophone cinephile circles. This one blew my mind. Seeing it in the cinema, with English subtitles but in Telugu, it was just like, what have I seen? And I'm going to have to do research on this mythology and find out about the Kali Yuga and all the other things. And the incredible and incredibly nuanced mythological weapons that come directly from Hindu mythology that are being used in this movie. There's a weapon that can not only kill you, but it will remove you from history. Basically, it removes you from the timeline. Every inch of you is gone. You would not have existed in the past or in the future. There's weapons like that in this, and they're just put in there as an extra weapon. And it's only when you dig into the research you find out this thing is incredible, and it shits on the Infinity Gauntlet. Kalki 2898 AD. You should see it. It'll blow your mind. There is a cinematic universe starting with this one. This is the first of a series, I've been told. And it did well enough at the box office to carry that. Be interesting to see where that one goes. And I'm always interested, of course, in other cultures' views of science fiction. And Kalki gives that. Mind-blowingly good. Mind-blowingly, what the hell just happened? And I love that a lot. Let me get a small budget one that I found on a streaming service. A thing called Discontinued, which is about a young woman who's having trouble in her life. She's just not getting her ducks lined up. And then, like everybody else in the world, she gets an announcement that the world is actually a simulation and it's being discontinued in a week. And all the people in the world are going to be given the option of living eternally in the happiest moment of their lives or staying in the emptied out world. And she chooses to stay. And she chooses to live a life on her own terms in an increasingly mad and then empty world. This one is just a piece of humanity and a humane kind of film. And it's about, like so many good films, getting your shit together. It's a redemption arc for somebody who's had a troubled life and then finds out that she's not even real. I love this film for so many reasons, most of which have to do with the fact that it takes a new science fiction concept, the idea of the world being a simulation, and it does something grounded and human with it. It doesn't treat it like an opportunity for an action-adventure film. It treats it as an opportunity to sit back and think about what it means to be a human and what it means to have a life. That's a heavy load for a low-budget, small-scale, but cosmic movie to have. And Discontinued does that very, very well. Increasingly, I'm finding the most satisfying movies aren't the big ones. They're the small ones that do something different. The small ones that have got the room to take a chance. They don't have to worry about stockholders. They don't have to worry about making $500 million or $1 billion. They just have to get an audience, cover the costs, and tell a bloody good story. And Discontinued does that. I like it for that reason. And it's one of those kind of heartwarming movies, which doesn't always happen in science fiction. Science fiction is so enamored of dystopia and dysfunction and conflict that having science fiction movies that are heartwarming feels like a totally new thing. And I think that's great too. Next up, we've got The Substance. Coralie Farget's movie, the second movie after Revenge, which in 2 is a fantastic film. Demi Moore was never better. Dennis Quaid is gross in this one. Margaret Qualley playing the, let's say, Mr. Hyde to Demi Moore's Dr. Jekyll in a way, is marvelous as well. It's about the male gaze. It's about how aging people in the media are treated. It's a monster movie. It's a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde movie. It's a critique of the facility of popular media. It's so many things, and it's done so well. And Coralie Farget takes it to 11 and goes, yep, hey Troma, hold my beer. And then it takes things to an absurd but graceful conclusion. There's a reason why this movie is getting on everybody's top 10 lists. It deserves to be there. It's earned its place. and that says things that need to be said, particularly in a world where female performers are being astroturfed by crisis management companies that are hired by men. And I'm looking at you, Justin Balboni and Johnny Depp. This is one of those movies that sits perfectly in a moment in history. And it does fantastically interesting things with the idea of women aging in the media. There's nothing not to love in this film, even if it will put you off eating prawns for a while. If you haven't seen The Substance, you should. I'm waiting to get my 4K of it now. I've got it on order. And it's one of those movies that's going to be the movie they talk about when they talk about 2024 in cinema, moving on into the future. Next one I talked about recently with my most recent umbrella haul. It's a movie from around 2000 called Pulse, a Japanese ghost stories cyberpunk movie where ghosts re-enter the world and take people away through the medium of computers and the then very ephemeral internet. Fantastic movie. It does a lot with the special effects are used so perfectly and surgically to build the world and to build the ghosts coming into the world and to build the fear and the increasing chaos and the increasing emptiness of Tokyo as it is in this film. It's just something special of its own, and it's incredibly delicately put together in a way that carries you along, and you're moving along this journey of a world haunted by ghosts that are basically turning everybody into a ghost. And the movie takes you along so subtly, you don't realize how far you've gone until there's a moment where you see it on the screen. You think, oh yeah, there's been decreasing numbers of people in this movie. Terrific stuff. It's great that Umbrella's put out a collector's edition. They've also put out a standard edition of it. And I think movies like this, which again, because it's not in the English language, are just not getting well regarded enough. There was an American remake, but it really didn't work because taking it out of its native cultural context just didn't work. It needs to be set in Tokyo. It needs to be about Japan. It needs to be about the ghosts in the machine coming from that Japanese context. And Pulse is an impressive piece of cinema. If you haven't seen it, you should. And if you haven't seen it for a while, again, you should re-watch it. Down to the last three now. Meander, small budget French film about a woman who's wandering along a highway. She flags down a car and gets picked up and given a lift by a guy. And on the radio comes the news that a serial killer's on the loose. And he has a certain tattoo on his hand. And the woman notices the man has that tattoo. But that's not what the movie's about. She wakes up inside a narrow tube somewhere. And she's told she has to crawl through that tube to a certain point and then keep going through this maze of increasingly dangerous traps. And she's being tested for some reason. And it's tense as hell. It's freaky as hell. It's horror movie mixed with science fiction. And our protagonist, I'm not even sure she's ever given a name, has to prevail in when she doesn't know the circumstances. And there are constant traps trying to kill her. Love this one. Low budget, does a lot with a little. The production design is fantastic. The traps are increasingly icky and difficult. And it works. It doesn't give us an enormous epiphany at the end, but it's not too much of a spoiler to say that the protagonist prevails. And it's weird, it's unusual, and again, it's not a science fiction movie that's about conflict or dystopia. It's about a very specific peril, and I like Meander for that. This one everybody knows about. Megan, the AI doll that's freaky. It does a freaky dance. It was created by a woman who's a single woman, but a brilliant cyberneticist who suddenly gets custody of her niece when her niece's parents die in a car crash. And so to help her manage her niece, she creates an AI robot doll called Megan, not knowing that it's a hostile AI. There is a second one coming out soon, and I'm looking forward to that as well. It's one of those movies that combines horror, science fiction with comedy. And there is some very dark comedy in this movie. And the uncanny valleyness of the android Megan is a lot of fun in this one. It works. And again, it's a movie that's not about conflict or dystopia. And I'm so over dystopias. I'm so over science fiction movies as a metaphor for war movies. And so getting all these other ones, which are looking at things that are of concern, like AI and the prevalence of AI in society, those tiny little bits of stuff that are starting to appear in our science fictional narratives are really, really interesting. And Megan, or Megan, whatever you want to call it, is that it's entertaining, it's fun, it's got horror, it's got blood and guts, it's got a very, very creepy antagonist. The last one's a low-budget film that I only heard about obscurely, and I dragged out a copy of it. It's about 3 old people who discover an alien. It's a movie called Jules, and it has a good small cast. Ben Kingsley's an old guy living in a little rural town in upstate New York, and he's starting to lose his marbles. His wife's died, his daughter's concerned about him. He's living in his own house, and he's kind of functioning. I think a spaceship crashes in his backyard, and there's a grey alien in it who he names Jules, and he slowly invites it into the house and gives it things to eat and gives it things to drink. And then his neighbours in the town start finding out about him. One of his neighbours is played by Jane Curtin, the other neighbour is played by Harriet Sansom Harris, and they kind of form a family with this strange little alien. And the 3 of them, who are each lonely people, start bonding together, and they start looking after each other. And the catalyst for this is this strange, silent alien, and they're trying to help the alien repair his spaceship. If it had been done wrong, it would have been as kind of maudlin as a movie like Batteries Not Included, which I'm not a fan of because that's a little too Spielbergian. But this one has a kind of emotional honesty about it. The ensemble cast does fantastically well. Ben Kingsley is marvellous as Milton, the guy who's losing his marbles, and his friends start realising that he is losing his marbles. And there's a kind of tragic part to that as well. But at the end of his life, he's reconnecting with his humanity, even as he is of diminished capacity. It's a really interesting little film. And it's done sweetly. It's got its comic aspects to it. It's got its drama. It's got its character pieces. But it really lands well. It was directed by Mark Turteltaub and written by Gavin Steckler. And this one's another little hidden gem. Small budget, small scale. But it is science fiction as a lens through which to examine our humanity. And I like that kind of science fiction a lot. And again, because all the big blockbuster bang bang pew pew, zoom zoom kind of science fiction movies are getting all the regard and getting all the publicity, these small, honest little films are just not. And I think that is incredibly tragic. Science fiction was never just about war. It was never just about dystopia. It was about a lot of things, particularly as we moved into the new age science fiction in the 60s. It was about science fiction as it will change and as it's a metaphor for various forms of humanity. I mean, one of the best things that happened to science fiction was in the 60s, utopian science fiction like Star Trek came in. Humanity and the human and the nature of being human and what it means to be a good person, what it means to be a good citizen, what it means to be a good, intelligent being became part of the narrative. And a lot of these movies that I've got on my top 10 list here are about that. And I really like that. I think it's been a great year, or 2 years, 3 years maybe, for science fiction. But it's not at the top end of the market. It's down in the grungier kind of suburban areas of the market. And I like that as well. It's been a great year for cinema and a great year for that kind of cinema. So thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, give it a thumbs up. All that stuff helps the channel. You can also support the channel by becoming a channel member or by becoming a patron at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. Next up, I've got the Monday video, and I've got some interesting plans for that. I think I found some 1960s obscurities that might be fun to do. So until all that happens, until my live stream at New Year's Eve between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. New Year's Eve, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Make your own top 10 lists and see how it goes. And I'll catch you next time.